The first bear we found wasn't torn apart like I expected. It was arranged. Its body lay in a shallow creek, water whispering around it, head turned toward the trees as if it had been placed there on purpose. Its eyes were gone, two neat black hollows. Blood had run downstream in thin ribbons, but there wasn't a single paw print in the mud except our own. I crouched beside it, my breath fogging in the cold air. This wasn't wolves, I muttered. Dr. Ames, the biologist leading our team, adjusted her glasses and shook her head. No scavenging, no bite marks I can identify. Something cut it open. The smell hit next. Not the usual sour rot of carrion, but something sharper, metallic and sweet, like pennies soaked in sap. My stomach nodded. Harris, our local guide, stood apart from us, one hand gripping the strap of his rifle. "We should go back," he said quietly, eyes scanning the tree line. "These woods aren't right this year." I almost laughed. We'd been hired to track a rise in bear attacks near Klingman's Dome, and Harris had been muttering superstitions since day one. But now, I felt it too. A sudden snap echoed from deep in the pines. Not a twig underfoot. Something heavier. Something watching. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind, just the thin gurgle of the creek. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. Harris's voice was a whisper now. "It's not the bears we should be worried about." I looked back at the carcass. Someone, or something, had carved a perfect circle into its chest, deep enough to show bone, and whatever did, it was still out there. We marked the location on GPS, though Harris said it wouldn't matter. "Your satellites don't work where the old things walk," he muttered. We hiked another mile north, following a ridge where the pines thinned and the ground was littered with needles. The air was wrong here, heavier, like it was holding its breath. Even the snow seemed dimmer under the canopy. Then I saw them. Claw marks, high, far above what a black bear could reach. They cut through the bark in clean, straight gouges, as if whatever made them had hands instead of paws. I ran my fingers over them. The wood was fresh, still damp. Ames crouched to examine some tracks in the frost. "Not ursine," she murmured. "Too narrow. Toes. Elongated." "Or human," I offered. She gave me a look. "A barefoot man, 9 feet tall." We kept moving. The forest pressed in, shadows lengthening even though the sun was barely past noon. Every so often I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Not the frantic flutter of a bird or squirrel, but something slow, deliberate. Harris stopped us at a clearing. In the center stood a dead oak, its branches split and hanging like broken limbs. Around its base were small piles of stones, each one topped with a strip of fur, coarse, black, and matted with dried blood. "This is a marker," Harris said. "Means we're in its territory." Ames scoffed. "It's..." He didn't answer. A low sound rolled through the trees then. Not a growl, but something deeper, almost a voice. It seemed to vibrate in my ribs. Ames glanced at me, face pale. "Tell me you heard that." Before I could answer, it came again, closer. By the time we set camp, the light was already dying behind the ridge. The sky went from deep blue to black in minutes, swallowing the last warmth of the day. We built a fire in a shallow pit, the flames throwing long, twitching shadows across the tree trunks. Harris insisted on keeping it small. "Too much light brings attention," he said. "From what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. No one spoke for a while. We ate in silence, the wind carrying scents of pine, smoke, and something faintly rancid, like old meat left in the sun. I kept glancing at the tree line, expecting to see eyes staring back. Ames broke the quiet. "If we're dealing with a new apex predator, we need to document behavior, feeding patterns, movement." Harris barked a laugh, short and humorless. "You think you can study it? This thing isn't part of the food chain, it's older than that." Later, in my tent, the cold crept in fast. I lay awake, listening to the forest. At first, just the normal chorus. Wind, branches creaking. Then it shifted. Something moved through the brush with a slow, steady pace. Too heavy for a deer, too deliberate for a bear. It stopped near camp. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the world in red and shadow. I could make out a tall silhouette between two pines. Thin, but towering, its head cocked as if listening. A long moment passed. Then it stepped back into the dark without a sound. I waited for Harris to yell or for Ames to unzip her tent, but no one stirred. By morning, we'd find out why. I woke to the sound of Harris cursing under his breath. The air was colder than it had been when we'd gone to sleep, my breath pluming in the gray dawn. When I unzipped my tent, I froze. Around our camp, in the snow and dead needles, someone had drawn a perfect circle. It was wide, at least 30 feet across, enclosing every tent, the fire pit, even our gear. The line was made of ash, thin but unbroken. Ames knelt beside it, brushing the ground with gloved fingers. "This wasn't here last night," she said. "No," Harris said. "It was." He pointed to a spot where the ash was faintly smudged. "It's a ward, or a warning. Depends who made it." I swallowed. "You're saying something came through our camp while we slept?" "Not came through," he said. "Walked around." The forest was utterly still again, the same heavy silence as the day before. Not even wind in the branches. Ames scoffed. "You two are letting superstition." She stopped mid-sentence, staring past me. I turned. Hanging from the lowest pine branch was a strip of black fur, knotted into a braid, dangling like some crude talisman. Beneath it, pressed into the snow, was a single footprint. It wasn't human. It wasn't bare. It was longer than my forearm, with 4 clawed toes and a deep heel mark that seemed to have sunk unnaturally far into the frozen earth. Harris knelt beside it, face grim. "It's marking us," he said. Ames looked at him sharply. "Marking us for what?" He didn't answer. Far off, in the depths of the trees, came that same low sound from yesterday, vibrating through the air, through my ribs, through the ground itself. Closer now. We moved out early, boots crunching in the frost. Harris insisted we follow the ridge south. Ames kept scanning for tracks, her breath puffing like smoke in the cold. The air was sharp, brittle with that metallic tang again. It grew stronger as we descended into a narrow gully. The smell clung to the back of my throat, coppery and sweet. Then we saw it. Another bear, this one much larger, sprawled across a bed of moss. Its fur was slick with frost, but the chest cavity had been split open cleanly, almost surgically. The heart was gone. Beside the carcass, on a flat stone, lay the heart itself. Perfect, untouched, red against the green moss. Ames gagged, turning away. Harris didn't move. "It's for us," he said quietly. I laughed without meaning to. A short, shaky sound. "What?" He nodded at the stones around the body. They formed a spiral, each one smeared with blood. "It's leaving offerings, or messages." Ames regained herself, snapping photos. "This is behavior. Purposeful. Intelligent. Predatory," Harris added. A branch snapped above us. We froze. On the ridge stood a tall, shadowed figure, motionless. The shape was wrong. Too thin in the torso, arms hanging too long. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was looking directly at us. The air seemed to tighten, pressing on my chest. Then it turned, stepping back into the trees without a sound. Ames whispered, That wasn't..." "Don't say it," Harris cut her off. We left the bear where it lay. As we climbed back to the ridge, the low sound came again, rolling through the forest like distant thunder. Only this time there was an answer. We made camp in a hollow near a frozen stream, the sky bruised purple with the coming night. None of us spoke much. Harris kept glancing uphill, toward where the figure had stood. The forest was alive with small sounds at first. Wind through pine needles, thighs, the occasional creak of a tree shifting. But as the light faded, that stillness settled in again. The quiet that felt intentional. We'd just finished eating when the first call came. It was the same low, resonant sound as before, but closer, deep enough to make the enamel in my teeth ache. Harris's head snapped toward the dark. Then from farther off, an answer. Higher pitched, but just as unnatural. Ames swallowed hard. "There's more than one." The calls went back and forth, a slow, deliberate exchange. We couldn't see anything beyond the ring of firelight, but I felt movement out there. The kind of shift you sense in your bones before your eyes catch up. I checked my rifle for the third time. Harris whispered, "If they come close, don't shoot unless you have to. Bullets don't always work on..." He stopped, like saying more might make it real. The next call was so near it rattled my tent poles. Then came the sound of branches bending under something heavy, circling us. Slow steps in the snow. Ames gripped her camera, aiming blindly toward the tree line. The flash burst, lighting the trees for an instant. In that white glare, I saw them. Not just one. 3 shapes, tall and wrong-limbed, eyes reflecting silver like wet stones. The flash died, and the dark swallowed them whole. But their footsteps didn't stop. They were getting closer. We didn't sleep that night. The footsteps kept circling, slow and deliberate, just outside the glow of the fire. Every few minutes, one of those low calls rolled through the dark, answered from farther away. It was like they were talking about us. Harris sat with his rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the black wall of trees. Ames tried to photograph them again, but the shapes stayed just out of range. Around 3 a.m., the sounds stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, the fire was nearly out and Harris's chair was empty. Panic punched me awake. I checked the tents. Ames was still there, zipped inside, but Harris's sleeping bag lay flat, untouched. "Ames," I hissed, shaking her shoulder. She blinked at me, bleary and pale. "Where's Harris?" Her eyes widened. She scrambled out of the tent, scanning the camp. No tracks led away from the circle. None. Then I noticed something. A narrow strip of ash missing from the ring, as if something had stepped over it and carried him away. We called his name until our voices were hoarse, but the woods stayed dead quiet. No calls, no footsteps, just the sound of our own breathing. At dawn, we found a single object lying on the frozen stream bed 100 yards from camp. Harris's hat, soaked through with blood. Ames stared at it, then at me. "We have to go." Before I could answer, a branch snapped high above us. Something was watching from the ridge. We broke camp in record time. Neither of us mentioned Harris's hat again. The plan was simple: follow the GPS south until we hit the logging road where our truck was parked. The forest had other plans. We hiked for hours, the cold biting deeper as the sun climbed. My GPS showed we were making progress, but the terrain didn't match. Landmarks repeated, the same fallen birch with its roots clawing at. The air, the same split boulder covered in frost. By noon, Ames stopped dead. "We passed this tree already." She pointed at a pine with claw marks halfway up its trunk. I checked the GPS again. We were moving in a straight line, but the forest kept folding back on itself. A low wind stirred then, carrying with it that sweet metallic scent. Ames's hand tightened around her camera. "It's driving us in circles," she whispered. We pushed on, ignoring the twisting in our guts. The silence felt thicker now, like the air itself was holding us in place. At some point, I realized we were no longer walking toward the road. We were walking downhill, deeper into the valley where the trees grew close enough to block most of the light. Ames cursed under her breath. "We're not leaving. It's not letting us." The sound came again, the same deep, resonant call. But this time it was answered from behind us. Then again, closer, from ahead. We stopped moving. In the stillness, I heard something else. Not the heavy steps from before, but the sound of bare fingers brushing bark, dragging slowly along the trunks on either side of us. Ames whispered, "They're hurting us." She was right, and we were walking straight into their hands. The slope leveled out into a hollow where the trees gave way to a clearing. Snow lay untouched except for a perfect spiral of footprints pressed deep into the earth, each one far too long to be human. In the center of the spiral stood a totem. It was built from bones, bear skulls, deer antlers, even something that looked disturbingly human, lashed together with braided fur. Bits of frozen flesh still clung to some of them. The structure rose 10 feet high, crowned with a single black stone that seemed to drink the light. Ames's voice trembled. "This is a nest marker. Some predators." "This isn't a predator," I cut her off. "This is a shrine." The air was warmer here, unnaturally so. My breath didn't fog. The metallic smell was almost overwhelming, coating my tongue like blood. Then I saw the trees. Around the edge of the clearing, trunks were carved with strange symbols, angular shapes, repeating patterns, all at eye level for something much taller than me. Some grooves were fresh, sap still bleeding down the bark. A sound drifted from the far side of the clearing. Not the deep call this time, but something softer, a rasping exhale, as if whatever was making it was savoring the air. Ames raised her camera. "If we document this..." The exhale turned into a hiss. From between two carved trunks, a figure stepped into view. Tall, wrong-jointed, skin stretched pale over sharp bones, its head tilted, studying us with reflective eyes. It took one slow step forward, another. Then, from the trees behind us, came the sound of more footsteps. We weren't just looking at one, we were surrounded. The first one moved with a strange, gliding gait, shoulders rolling like a predator stalking prey. Its eyes caught the weak daylight, gleaming silver. Behind us, the others emerged. 3, no, 4. They fanned out silently, their pale limbs too long, their torsos narked. Row and starved, none of them made a sound. Ames gripped my arm. "Run!" We bolted toward the gap between two carved trees, snow spraying under our boots. The creatures followed without breaking stride, their steps eerily steady, as if they knew they'd catch us eventually. Branches whipped my face, my lungs burned, the low call rolled out again. Not behind us, but ahead. They were cutting us off. Ames stumbled over a fallen log. I yanked her up, but she'd dropped her camera. "Leave it!" I barked. We crashed into a narrow ravine, sides slick with frost. The ground funneled us downward, the slope too steep to climb. Somewhere above, something moved along the ridge, tracking us from both sides. A shadow crossed in front of us, one of them dropping down into the ravine ahead. It crouched, head cocked, arms dangling almost to the ground. I fired. The shot cracked through the stillness. The thing jerked but didn't fall. It took a single step back into the shadows, as if inviting us to follow. We didn't. We scrambled up the opposite bank, clawing through roots and ice until we burst onto another slope. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. Ames doubled over, gasping. Why didn't it kill us? I didn't answer, because I already knew. It wasn't hunting us to eat, it was leading us somewhere. We didn't stop moving until the light began to fade again. My legs ached, but the cold sweat soaking my back kept me from resting. The forest had changed. The pines here were older, trunks so thick it would take 3 people to wrap around them. Moss carpeted everything, even the stones, muffling our footsteps. Ames checked her GPS. "It's useless. Says we're 2 miles from the road." I looked around. "Does this look like the road to you?" The trees pressed close, forming a corridor. The ground underfoot was oddly smooth, as if worn by centuries of travel. I realized it wasn't just a game trail, it was a path. The silence here was absolute. No wind, no birds. Even the snow seemed to fall more slowly. Ames paused to take a photo of the massive trees. Her flash lit something further ahead. Stone. We found it a minute later, an archway built from stacked slabs, half swallowed by moss and roots. Symbols like the ones in the clearing were carved deep into the rock, edges still sharp despite the weathering. "This isn't natural," Ames whispered. I stepped under the arch. The temperature dropped instantly, my breath misting in the dim air. Beyond it, the path descended into a gorge, walls sheer and dark with lichen. A sound drifted up from below, faint, almost like singing. Ames caught my sleeve. "We're not going down there." Another sound answered from behind us. A low call, closer than it should have been. I glanced back. Between the trees, I saw them again. Motionless, watching, their silver eyes unblinking. The singing grew louder. We had nowhere to go but forward. The gorge swallowed the light within minutes. The walls rose steep on either side, dripping with meltwater that tapped against the rocks in slow rhythm. The singing had faded, replaced by the occasional echo of movement, too deliberate to be falling stone. The path narrowed until we had to walk single file. My boots crunched over scattered debris. Bones, mostly deer, but mixed among them were things I couldn't place. Small, human-sized. Ames knelt, brushing snow from a rusted object. It was a canteen, dented and streaked with mud. "This is military issue," she murmured. "Vietnam era." Farther along, we found a shredded backpack tangled in roots. The canvas was stiff with age, but inside were Polaroids. Hikers smiling in the sun, a campsite by a stream. The last photo was nothing but black, except for a faint glimmer of 2 silver dots. Ames shoved it back into the bag. People have been disappearing here for decades. The walls of the gorge grew slicker, the air heavier. That metallic scent was strong again, mingling with damp earth. I kept glancing up, half expecting to see one of them perched above us. We reached a bend where the path widened into a pocket of level ground. In the center stood a wooden post, splintered but upright. Something had been nailed to it once, the outline still visible. At our feet, half buried in the frost, was a shoe. A woman's hiking boot, the laces neatly tied. Before we could speak, the singing returned, this time from both directions. Ames's hand trembled on my arm. "They're closing us in." I looked up. On the rim of the gorge, silhouettes moved in unison, watching, waiting. The gorge narrowed until the walls nearly touched. The singing was louder now, a warped melody that seemed to echo inside my skull. Snow gave way to bare stone underfoot, slick and cold. Then we saw it. A dark slit in the rock ahead, half hidden by hanging moss. Steam drifted from its opening, carrying that same metallic scent, now strong enough to sting my nose. Ames stopped. "We can't go in there." The singing swelled behind us. Shadows moved along the rim again, silver eyes catching stray glimmers of light. We had no choice. I ducked inside first. The rock scraped my shoulders, then opened into a low chamber. The air was warm, damp, and thick with the smell of blood and something sweeter, decay under heat. Our lights swept across the walls. They weren't just rock. They were carved. Figures, crude but detailed, showing tall, thin shapes surrounding smaller human ones. In some, the humans knelt. In others, they were gone entirely. Bones littered the floor in heaps, picked clean. Some were cracked open, marrow stains still visible. Ames gagged but followed as I moved deeper. The tunnel sloped down, water trickling along the sides. The singing had shifted. It was coming from inside now, layered voices overlapping, harmonizing in a way that made my skin crawl. We reached another chamber, larger, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a stone table, stained dark. Around it, wooden frames leaned against the walls, each strung with ropes, as if waiting to hold something, or someone. Ames whispered, "This is where they bring them." A sound came from the darkness beyond the table, slow footsteps. And then the singing stopped. The silence after the singing was worse than the sound itself. Ames's breathing was ragged, every inhale loud in the heavy air. My own pulse thudded in my ears. From the darkness beyond the stone table, something stepped forward. It was tall, easily 8 feet, but its limbs were too long, bending wrong at the joints. The head was narrow, the skin pale like moonlit bone. Its eyes were enormous, reflecting our flashlight beams in a way that made them look silver and wet. It didn't walk so much as drift, each movement impossibly smooth, as though the stone floor offered no resistance. I thought it was hairless until I noticed fine, colorless strands trailing from its scalp like frost-rimmed spider silk. Its mouth opened. The voice that emerged wasn't a growl or roar. It was the same song we'd heard outside, but now only one voice, impossibly deep and textured. The sound vibrated in my chest. Ames stumbled backward, hitting the wall. My light jittered across the carvings. All those kneeling figures, their arms raised toward these same pale forms. The creature tilted its head, studying us. Then, from the darkness behind it, more shapes emerged. 4, 5, maybe more, their movements overlapping like echoes of each other. The first one reached a hand toward me. Long fingers, jointed too many times, tipped with dull, claw-like nails. I couldn't move. My body was locked, frozen by something deeper than fear. Then a smell rolled over us. Fresh blood, hot and metallic. Ames whispered, "It's feeding." From the shadows, they dragged something forward. Not an animal. Not anymore. It had been a man. Ames yanked me backward before my brain could catch up. His grip was iron, his breath hot against my ear. "Run!" We turned, boots scraping stone, flashlight beams swinging wildly over the tunnel walls. Behind us, the singing swelled. Not words, just tones that pressed into the back of my skull. The passage sloped upward, but it was narrow, the ceiling low enough to make us duck. Something scraped against the stone behind us, a sound like fingernails dragging along glass. I risked a glance over my shoulder. They were coming. The tall one moved in jerks now, its head snapping from side to side like it was scenting us. The others filled the tunnel, limbs brushing the walls. Their silver eyes caught our light, and for a second, I thought I saw hunger. Not animal hunger, but something older. We hit a fork in the passage. Ames didn't hesitate, choosing the left path. It twisted sharply, narrowing until my shoulders brushed both walls. I could hear my own heartbeat in my teeth. Then came the thud. Something hit the wall behind us hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Ames cursed. "They're faster than we thought." The tunnel dropped suddenly, a steep slope slick with moisture. We slid, trying to control the fall, landing hard in a shallow pool. The smell was worse here, rotting meat and something sweet underneath. A flicker of movement above, pale hands gripping the tunnel edge. One of them was lowering itself toward us, joints bending backward, mouth widening until it split the face in half. Ames grabbed my arm. "We're not going to outrun them." The singing grew louder, and then we saw the light. The glow ahead was faint, more a suggestion than a beacon, but in the suffocating dark it was enough to pull us forward. Ames shoved me ahead, his voice low and urgent. "Go. Don't stop for anything." The singing didn't fade. It twisted, harmonizing into some. Ething sharper, almost mocking. The sound seemed to bend the tunnel, making the air feel thick, syrupy. My legs burned, but the thought of those hands closing around my ankle kept me moving. The slope curved, water running in a shallow stream under our boots. The light brightened, spilling gold across the stone. I could almost taste it, warm, like sunlight after winter. We burst into a cavern so tall the ceiling vanished into blackness. The source of the glow was a pool at the center, its surface shimmering like molten metal. The air was warm here, almost humid, and the smell, sweet, floral, was so out of place it made my stomach turn. Ames slowed, scanning. "This doesn't feel right." I knew he was right. The singing was gone, completely. That silence was worse than the noise. From the tunnel behind, shadows flickered. They hadn't given up. They were waiting, watching. Something stirred in the golden pool. Ripples spread outward, though nothing had touched the surface. A shape began to rise. Not a body, not exactly, but a suggestion of one. Limbs formed and unformed as though it couldn't decide what to be. It spoke without sound, the words pressing directly into my skull. "Leave one." Ames tensed, hand moving toward his holster. I could see the question in his eyes, fight or run. But the thing didn't wait. The pool erupted, liquid splashing hot against my face. We had seconds to choose. The heat from the golden liquid burned my skin, but the pain was distant, dulled by the pounding in my head. Ames yanked me back, the ripples in the pool swelling into waves. The voice came again, pressing deeper, its tone both pleading and commanding. "Leave one, or both stay forever." I didn't need to ask what it meant. The pool wanted a sacrifice. The shadows in the tunnel writhed, inching closer, shapes too thin and too long to be human. They didn't step into the cavern. They didn't have to. The choice pinned us in place. Ames gritted his teeth. "Run, and they'll take us. Give it what it wants." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I scanned the cavern, desperate for another way out. High above, a slit of light cut through the darkness, an opening in the stone. Too far to reach without climbing. Too far to matter unless... The pool's surface churned harder. A pale hand, wrong, jointed backward, emerged, reaching. Ames shoved me toward the rock wall. "Climb, now." I'm not leaving you. My voice cracked, but the truth was already clawing at me. One of us wasn't making it out. You will, because I'm not giving it you. The shadows surged, the hand lunged, Ames fired twice, the cracks echoing like thunder. The pool screamed, not sound but vibration, shaking loose chunks of stone. I climbed, fingers scraped raw, boots slipping, but I kept going. The last thing I saw before pulling myself into the light was Ames, standing between me and the thing in the pool, gun raised, shadows closing in. And then the world above swallowed me whole. The sunlight hit me like a blade, slicing through the cavern's cold stink. I rolled onto rough grass, coughing up the sour taste of the air below. For a moment, I just lay there, trying to believe I'd made it out. Then the silence sank in. No birds, no wind through the pines, no distant hum of insects, just a wide, dead quiet that pressed into my ears until I could hear my own pulse. I turned to the jagged crack I'd crawled through. The darkness beyond seemed thicker now, as if the cavern had sealed itself. No sound of gunfire, no voice calling my name. Ames, I whispered, but the name felt too small for the space around me. I staggered to my feet. The forest stretched out in all directions, but something was wrong. The trees were too still, the shadows too sharp. It was as if the world had been drained of movement. I moved toward a ridge, thinking I might see the highway. Instead, I saw the town, or what was left of it. From up here, the streets looked empty, cars abandoned mid-turn, doors hanging open. It hit me then. The thing in the pool hadn't just been underground, its reach was bigger. My hands shook as I scanned the tree line, searching for any sign of life. A flicker of movement caught my eye, a figure standing far off among the trees. Too tall, arms too long. It didn't move toward me, it just watched. The same silence clung to the air, but now it felt heavier, loaded with something waiting. Behind me, the crack in the rocks gave a low, wet sound, like something breathing, and I realized I hadn't escaped at all. The figure in the trees didn't move. It stood there, head tilted slightly, as if trying to make sense of me. Even at this distance, I could tell it wasn't right. Its skin too pale, its outline faintly blurred, like heat shimmer. I blinked, and it was closer. Not by much, but enough that my gut twisted. I backed away from the ridge, my boots crunching on dry pine needles. The sound seemed too loud in the crushing silence. I glanced back at the crack in the rocks, still there, still breathing. My mind spun between the two dangers, the thing in the trees and whatever waited underground. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The space between the trunks was empty, though the shadows seemed thicker now. A faint hum rose in the air, low, steady, almost mechanical. I turned in a slow circle, searching for the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, without warning, the hum cut out. Branches cracked to my left. My head snapped toward the sound, but nothing moved. The smell of damp soil and iron drifted past me. My pulse thundered. The silence returned, heavier than before. I made for the ridge again, hoping for some landmark, anything to anchor myself. That's when I saw it. A smear in the air, like a reflection on water. It hovered at the tree line, pulsing faintly. A voice, soft and wrong, whispered from it. You came back. I froze. My breath puffed white in the warm air. The smear widened, and for a split second, I saw faces inside. Not strangers, people I knew, people who shouldn't be alive. I couldn't move. The faces inside the shimmer were frozen in mid-expression, mouths open, eyes wide, as if caught in the middle of screaming. Their features flickered like an old television picture, fading in and out. Then one of them shifted. It was my brother. I knew it instantly, despite the way his skin looked stretched too. Tight over his skull, he pressed his palms against the inside of the shimmer, his mouth forming my name, though no sound came through. I stumbled forward before my brain caught up, every instinct screaming to get him out. The air grew colder with each step. The hairs on my arms stood on end. The hum returned, sharper now, burrowing into my skull. My knees weakened, but I pushed forward until the shimmer pulsed violently, like a heartbeat. The force shoved me back, my boots scraping against the soil. My brother's face twisted, and something behind him moved. not a person, not anything human. Its shape kept changing, as though it couldn't decide what to be. Long arms, too many joints, a mouth where no mouth should be. It reached for him. The shimmer rippled, and I heard a single clear word. Leave. The pulse hit again, harder. I stumbled to the ground, gasping, dirt in my teeth. When I looked up, the shimmer was smaller, fading. My brother's face blurred, then vanished entirely. The hum stopped. I was alone again. The silence pressed in until it felt like my eardrums might burst. Somewhere behind me, deep in the woods, a single branch snapped, and then another. Whatever had been watching me before was closer now, much closer. The sound wasn't random. It had rhythm. One branch snapped, then a pause, another crunch. Something, or someone, was walking toward me slowly, deliberately, as though they wanted me to hear them. I forced myself to my feet, every muscle trembling. The trees ahead were just shadows, their shapes shifting as the wind pushed through, but no wind could make footsteps. I pulled my flashlight from my jacket. The beam cut through the dark in a thin, trembling line. The ground ahead was uneven, marked with shallow depressions, like something heavy had passed through moments ago. The smell hit next. Damp earth mixed with something metallic, sharp enough to make me gag. Blood. A figure emerged between the trees, not all at once. First an arm, pale and wrong in the way it bent. Then a leg, dragging slightly. Finally, its head tilted into view. It wasn't my brother this time. The face was familiar in another way. Mrs. Keller, the woman who'd gone missing 2 months ago. Only her eyes were gone, replaced by deep black pits that seemed to swallow the light from my torch. Her lips moved soundlessly, but I didn't need to hear her to understand. She was mouthing the same word I'd heard in the shimmer. Leave. Behind her, shapes began to multiply. More figures. Some I recognized from old missing posters, all of them swaying, moving closer. The air thickened, as though the forest itself had decided to hold me in place. My legs felt rooted, my breath ragged. The nearest figure reached out a hand, its skin cool and slick. The moment its fingertips brushed my sleeve, the hum returned, louder than ever. And the world went white. When the light faded, I was no longer in the forest. I stood in an open field, the grass brittle and white like it had been drained of color. The sky above wasn't blue or gray. It was an endless sheet of pale, pulsing light, the same glow that had swallowed me whole. The air was silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind, no insects, no heartbeat in my ears. I clutched my flashlight, though its beam seemed dull against the brightness here. The figures were still with me. They stood at the edge of the field, unmoving. Mrs. Keller was closest, her mouth opening again in slow, exaggerated shapes. This time I could hear her voice. They're listening. Who? My voice cracked like it didn't belong to me. Her answer came not as words, but as a vibration through the ground. Shapes rose from the pale grass. Tall, thin silhouettes, their bodies bending unnaturally, faces hidden beneath smooth, featureless masks. They moved without footsteps, gliding closer. With each shift, the world seemed to flicker, like a failing film reel. Mrs. Keller's form began to dissolve, breaking into particles of pale dust that swirled toward the nearest silhouette. The others followed, each of them unraveling into nothingness until I was alone. The tallest silhouette stopped inches from me, its mask tilted down, the surface rippling as if something beneath it struggled to break free. Then a sound came, not from its mouth but from everywhere at once. A voice, layered and deep. One remains. I tried to move, but the pale grass wrapped around my ankles like hands. The mask began to split down the middle, revealing a darkness deeper than the sky above. It leaned closer and whispered my name. The sound of my name was wrong. It didn't just echo. It clung, burrowing into my ears until it felt like it was nesting in my skull. I tried to pull back, but the pale grass tightened its hold, cold as bone. My knees trembled. The mask split widened and I saw nothing inside. No face, no eyes, just a void pulling at me like gravity. The voice came again, inside my head now. You will be taken back, changed. A wind rose from the crack in its mask, whipping the colorless grass into a frenzy. The air burned cold, My breath crystallized in front of me. I could feel my memories. The scent of pine, the sound of my mother's laugh, the warmth of sunlight, peeling away one by one. It wasn't killing me. It was emptying me. No! My voice cracked. I reached for the flashlight, though I didn't know why. Its beam flickered once, twice, and then erupted in a burst of harsh white that didn't belong here. The thing recoiled, its mask trembling. The grass loosened just enough for me to wrench free. I ran. My legs were clumsy, the ground shifting like liquid beneath me, but I kept going until I reached the far end of the field. There, a black doorway hanging in the air, edges rippling like heat. I didn't think. I dove through. I hit damp earth hard. My flashlight landed beside me, its beam cutting through trees, real trees. I was back in the forest, but the air felt wrong, heavier, thicker. And when I looked at my hands, I saw pale strands of grass still coiled around my skin. They were moving. The forest was silent, not the kind of silence you get at night, but the kind that feels deliberate, like the world was holding its breath. I sat there, panting, while the pale strands of grass slithered slowly around my wrists. They weren't tightening, just holding, testing me. I yanked one free. It recoiled like a snake, disappearing into the soil without a trace. The otard. Hers followed, burrowing out of sight, leaving my skin clammy and tingling. I clicked the flashlight back on. The beam stretched between the trees, but the light didn't seem to reach far. Every trunk looked the same. Smooth, gray bark without leaves, no wind, no rustling. Then I saw it. A shadow moved between the trees, tall, narrow, gliding silently. My stomach twisted. It didn't have the pale mask, but it had the same wrong stillness, like a puppet whose strings were pulled by invisible hands. It stopped, halfway hidden behind a trunk, watching. I stepped back. My boot crunched on something brittle. I looked down. A bird skeleton, picked clean, its bones arranged in a perfect spiral. The shadow moved again, closer now. "Stay away," I whispered, though my voice sounded small in the heavy air. The figure tilted its head, just slightly, like it was studying me. Then, without warning, every tree around me creaked. The sound was deep, almost like groaning. One by one, their trunks bent toward me, slow and deliberate, until I felt surrounded. The shadow stepped forward. I could see its hands now. Too long, too thin, the fingers tapering into sharp, root-like points. And then it spoke, voice low and wet. "You brought something back with you." I didn't answer it. I couldn't. My throat was locked tight, my pulse hammering so loud it felt like the forest could hear it. The figure stepped closer, its root-like fingers flexing. The flashlight beam caught the side of its face. Not flesh, not bark, but something in between. Layers of gray skin cracked to reveal pulsing veins of green light, like sap glowing from within. "You shouldn't have touched it," it said. The voice scraped through the air, slow and deliberate. I stumbled back. My heel caught on the spiral of bird bones, and I fell hard. The moment my hands hit the soil, something writhed beneath my palms. Warm, alive. Thin roots curled around my fingers, sinking under my skin like needles. I screamed and tore at them. Blood welled up, but the roots clung deeper, burrowing into the veins of my wrist. The figure crouched in front of me. "It's part of you now." I swung the flashlight into its face. It hissed, the sound like steam against cold iron, and reeled back. The grip of the roots loosened just enough for me to wrench free. I scrambled to my feet, not caring which way I ran. The forest changed as I moved. Paths looped back on themselves, trees shifting subtly when I wasn't looking. Every breath tasted damp and sour. My arms burned where the roots had pierced me, and the green glow throbbed faintly beneath the skin. I tripped into a small clearing. Moonlight spilled onto the grass, and for a moment I thought I'd escaped. Then I looked down. My shadow was gone. In its place was something taller, thinner, standing behind me. I froze, every instinct telling me not to turn, but the air behind me felt heavy, pressing against my back like a held breath. Slowly, I looked over my shoulder. The thing standing there was shaped like me, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, bending slightly where they shouldn't, its head tilted with a slow, jerking motion, as if the neck bones had been rearranged. And its eyes, if you could call them that, were pits filled with faint green glow, the same light pulsing in my arm. It stepped forward. The sound was wrong. Not the crunch of grass, but the creak of wood, like a floorboard straining under weight. "Why?" I whispered before I could stop myself. It smiled. My smile. "Because you were chosen." Every muscle in my body screamed to move, but my legs didn't obey. The glow in my veins was spreading, creeping higher toward my shoulder. My skin tingled as if insects crawled beneath it. The double lifted its arm, mirroring me, but when its fingers moved, roots slithered from beneath its nails, reaching toward my face. I broke free of the paralysis and stumbled backward, crashing into the tree line. My breath came fast, ragged, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs might splinter. Branches whipped my skin as I ran. The forest seemed endless, twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. Every so often, I heard the hollow creak of footsteps behind me, always just out of sight. When I finally collapsed against a moss-covered stump, I realized the silence had returned. No footsteps, no movement. Then I saw it. Carved into the wood, in letters slick with fresh sap, were the words, "You can't outrun yourself." The words on the stump dripped like the tree itself was bleeding. I staggered back, but my hand brushed against the slick surface. The moment my skin touched the sap, a searing heat shot through my veins. I gasped, clutching my arm. The glow under my skin flared, bright enough to throw pale light across the forest floor. It didn't feel like light. It felt alive, crawling toward my chest. A rustle came from my left. I spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing except the slow sway of leaves. Then a whisper. "Almost ready." It wasn't my voice. It wasn't the double's voice either. It was older, rougher, like the wind carrying words it shouldn't know. The pain in my arm sharpened into pulses, each one syncing with my heartbeat. I realized the forest around me had shifted again. The trees were closer, their trunks bent toward me like a crowd leaning in to watch. The air was thick, syrupy, making every breath a struggle. I tried scraping the glowing lines from my skin with my nails, but the more I clawed, the deeper they seemed to root. Another step forward. The forest floor groaned. I looked down and saw why. Roots were coiling over my boots, sprouting from the soil and twining upward. I tore at them, snapping fibrous strands, but more replaced them instantly. In the distance, I saw movement, the double again, standing perfectly still, its eyes fixed on me. It didn't advance. It only raised its hand and pointed at my chest. I knew what it meant. The glow was almost there. And when it reached my heart, I had the sickening certainty that I wouldn't be me anymore. I tore free from the roots with a final, desperate yank. My boots slipped in the mud, but I didn't stop running. The glow in my arm pulsed like a heartbeat I couldn't control, sending jolts of heat through my ribs. Branches whipped against my face, leaving shallow cuts that stung. The forest no longer looked like the one I'd known my whole life. The path twisted in ways I didn't remember, as if the trees had rearranged themselves just to keep me lost. But the double, it was always ahead. No matter how fast I ran, it stayed 20 paces in front of me, moving without sound, gliding between trunks like it belonged here in a way I never could. Its back was straight, its movements precise, but its head turned slightly, just enough for me to see the edge of its mouth curl upward. It was smiling. I shouted at it, curses, demands, pleas. But the sound seemed to vanish before it reached it. Only my own ragged breathing filled my ears. Then it stopped. I slowed too, chest heaving. The double stood in a small clearing, perfectly still. Between us was a shallow pool of black water, the surface flat as glass. I couldn't see my reflection. The glow in my arm flared, and I saw it reflected in its arm. My veins lit up inside the double's body in perfect synchronization with mine. That's when I understood. It wasn't chasing me. It was guiding me, pulling me somewhere I didn't want to go. It pointed down into the black water. And though every instinct screamed to turn away, my body took a step forward on its own. The first step into the water was colder than I expected. Not the kind of cold that numbs you, but the kind that creeps under your skin and coils around your bones. The double stood still on the opposite shore, its arm glowing in sync with mine. The black surface didn't ripple around its legs. It was as if it wasn't standing in the water at all, just on it. I waded deeper. Each movement was sluggish, as though the water wanted to keep me there. The pool was no larger than a small room, but the bottom never came. My boots dangled over nothing. The double raised a hand, palm up. Something began rising from beneath the surface between us. Pale shapes, long and thin, like skeletal fingers. They weren't bones. They were roots, writhing, dripping with ink-dark liquid. They coiled around my wrists and ankles before I could move. The glow in my arm pulsed violently, sending sharp pain up my shoulder. I gasped, and black water filled my mouth. I thrashed, but the more I fought, the tighter they pulled. My vision blurred, the edges darkening. The double's face was the last thing I saw before my head slipped under. Beneath the surface, the water wasn't just black. It was full of shapes, twisting forms, human outlines with hollow faces swirled past me. Some reached out as if asking for help, others simply stared. The roots tugged me downward toward a faint light far below. For a moment, I thought it was the surface again, but the deeper I went, the more I realized the truth. The light wasn't escape. It was a door, and it was already opening. The door's light was blinding at first, a golden white so pure it felt out of place in this world. As the roots dragged me closer, the glow softened, revealing a frame made of twisted, coral-like bone. It wasn't hinged. It pulsed, breathing like the inside of a living thing. The moment I crossed its threshold, the crushing pull of the water vanished. I stumbled forward onto dry ground. My boots were dry, my clothes warm, as if I'd stepped through a dream. The air here was thick, humming with a low vibration that resonated in my teeth. The sky was black, yet full of faint, swirling shapes. Not clouds, but faces, hundreds of them, watching. The ground stretched out in every direction, smooth and reflective like wet obsidian. And far away, standing perfectly still, was my double. Only now, it wasn't me. Its features had shifted subtly, jaw sharper, eyes darker, smile wider than any human's should be. In its hand, it held something I recognized instantly, my father's old hunting knife. How? I started, but my voice came out wrong, too deep, too slow, like it was echoing from somewhere else. The double raised the knife to its face, pressing the blade against its cheek until blood welled. But the blood didn't drip. It floated upward, forming thin red threads that wove into the black sky. "You followed," it said, though its lips barely moved. "Now you see." The ground beneath my feet rippled. Shapes began forming in the reflection. Not mine, but dozens of me, each with slight differences. Some smiling, some crying, some whispering things I couldn't hear. The double tilted its head, knife gleaming. "Which one will you be?" The air tasted metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue. Each breath scraped down my throat, raw and sharp. My double stood unmoving, knife still in hand, but the reflections beneath us shifted faster now, their mouths opening in silent screams. I took a step forward. The ground pulsed under my boot like it was alive, sending faint tremors up my leg. I glanced down. My reflection didn't match me anymore. It tilted its head opposite mine, lips curling into something predatory. "What is this place?" I asked. My voice sounded smaller now, as though the sky was swallowing it. The double didn't answer. Instead, it knelt, placing the knife point down into the glassy ground. The moment the blade touched, a crack spiderwebbed outward in every direction. The reflections reacted instantly, pounding on the surface from below, their hands pressing up through the glass as if trying to break through. One of them, a version of me with blood pouring from its eyes, slammed its fist so hard the ground bulged upward. The crack widened. A shrill, inhuman whistle rose from it, so piercing I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears. Still, the double only watched me, head cocked. "You don't belong here," it said. and its voice was layered, dozens of tones speaking at once. "But you've been here longer than you know." The crack reached my boots. Cold fingers shot up from the surface, wrapping my ankles. I tried to pull away, but their grip tightened like iron. The double yanked the knife free, the sound like bone tearing. "Choose," it said, stepping closer. The ground gave way beneath me. I was falling, not down but sideways, into the screaming faces. I landed hard, but there was no impact sound, only a deep, throbbing hum. The floor beneath me was neither solid nor liquid, shifting in slow waves that rolled under my palms. The air was black, not dark, but black, a thick absinthe sea that clung to my skin like oil. Shapes moved within it, not shadows. Those require light, but impressions, like something was pushing against the edges of reality from the other side. Every time they brushed close, the hum in the air spiked, vibrating in my teeth. A narrow corridor appeared ahead, as if the darkness had been peeled back. Its walls were the same glassy surface as before, but now they held no reflections, only faint ripples. I stood, forcing my legs to obey, and stepped inside. The hum followed me, growing louder with each pace. Then came the whispers, first distant, then crowding in around my ears. "Keep moving. You're almost there. Turn back." They overlapped until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. Halfway down, the corridor tilted. My balance failed, and I slid, hands scraping against the slick surface. Something warm streaked my fingers. Blood. The walls were cutting me, invisible edges slicing deeper with every movement. A pale light glimmered ahead. I crawled toward it, each drag of my body leaving crimson streaks behind. When I reached the end, the light wasn't an opening. It was a figure. Not my double this time. Taller, thin enough that its limbs seemed stretched beyond human proportion. Its head bent unnaturally low to meet my gaze. "You've been following the wrong trail," it said, voice like glass grinding. Then its hand closed around my throat, and the corridor folded in on itself. When I opened my eyes, I was standing. The figure's grip was gone, but its presence pressed against the room like an unbearable weight. The space was small, circular, with walls made of the same dark, glass-like substance. They pulsed faintly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. The figure stood in the center. It didn't breathe, didn't shift, but I knew it was watching me. Not with eyes, but with something deeper. "You want answers," it said. Its mouth didn't move, but the words pressed directly into my mind. "You want to know what happened to them, to you." My throat was raw. "Yes." It tilted its head in a slow, insect-like motion. "Then you will give something in return." The hum in the air sharpened into a high, needling tone. The walls around us showed flickers of images. The missing crew, their faces twisted in expressions I couldn't recognize. The oil rig swallowed in unnatural fog. My own reflection, fractured and wrong. "What do you want?" I asked. Its long fingers uncurled, pointing at my chest. "Your anchor." I didn't understand. Then the images changed. My sister's face, her laugh, the only family I had left. "No," I said. The word felt small here. "If you refuse," the voice said, "you will leave empty. You will wander until the blackness takes you, as it took them." The pulsing walls sped up, beating like a frantic heart. My breath grew shallow. My sister's face lingered in the glass, as if she could see me. I knew then, this wasn't a choice between her and the crew. This was a choice between losing her or losing myself. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the darkness surged forward. The darkness swallowed everything. The floor, the walls, even the sound of my own breath. Then, like a thin crack of light in a sealed coffin, the figure's voice cut through. "Speak it." My tongue felt heavy, as if weighed down by something more than fee. "R." My sister's name trembled at the edge of my lips. I wanted to hold it, protect it, but the darkness coiled tighter, squeezing thought into panic. The images returned. The missing crew suspended in black water, their eyes wide but unblinking. One by one they faded, replaced by my sister's face, blurred and distant. I realized what anchor meant now, the tether to the life I knew, the thing keeping me human. If I gave her name, they'd take the memory, sever the bond, and I'd never feel the pull of home again. My chest burned for air. My voice cracked. The pressure on my skull was unbearable. Then, in the suffocating dark, I heard her laugh, faint, like an old recording. Not a memory, a lifeline. I clung to it, feeling the fog in my mind thin just enough to speak clearly. "You can't have her," I said. The darkness recoiled like a wounded animal. The figure shifted, its silhouette bending in unnatural angles. "Then you choose to break." I didn't know what it meant until the pain hit. A searing crack inside my head, as if the darkness had driven a spike through the core of me. My knees buckled, but I stayed upright, teeth clenched against a scream. When the darkness peeled away, the figure was gone. The room's walls were solid again, silent. But I knew something inside me had splintered, and I didn't know if it could be put back. I woke to the sound of waves, but not the rolling, endless ocean I remembered. These were shallow, slapping against something metallic. My head throbbed as I pushed myself up. The walls of the rig's control room were buckled inward, twisted by forces no storm could make. The air smelled sharp, ozone mixed with a faint sweetness that made my teeth ache. No one else was there. The crew, my team, all gone. Outside, the world didn't look right. The sea was flat, glassy, and a strange pale light hung over it, not from the sun, but from somewhere higher, or maybe deeper. The horizon was bent, curving unnaturally. I stumbled to the deck, my boots slipping on something slick. My reflection in the still water rippled, not because of movement, but because it breathed. It mirrored me wrong, mouth opening before mine, eyes blinking too slowly. I didn't look again. In the distance I spotted the anchor chain, but it didn't vanish into the sea. It stretched upward, taut, disappearing into that pale light above. My stomach turned as I realized the rig wasn't floating. We were hanging. Somewhere below, or above, the water pulsed as if something massive had exhaled. I could still hear my sister's laugh faintly, but now it was coming from the water's surface, as if inviting me to lean closer. I stepped back. The chain rattled, the rig shuddered, and I knew it was time to leave. But when I looked to the lifeboat, it was gone. The deck was empty except for me and the sound of waves that weren't really waves. I wasn't sure I'd ever reach the surface again, if there even was one.